Hello, everyone. This is Pastor Alan Hathaway from the Garrison Church of God. I'm glad you joined me for this particular thought or sermon. I want to talk to you about Father Abraham. And when I was working in camps, one of the songs that we used to sing a lot was Father Abraham had many sons, and you know the rest of it if you've been to camp. It's an interesting song in the sense that it has the idea of getting kids up and moving about and being excited. But I thought about the importance of Father Abraham, and we don't often think about that. But the Apostle Paul makes a great deal about that in both Romans and Galatians, the concept of Abraham being our spiritual father. And so I want to talk just a little bit about that. The basis of Paul's thinking actually comes out of Genesis chapter 17. And in that chapter, some interesting things take place in the life of the man Abraham. By the way, I've got my Father's Day tie on with all of the activities that are going on with this particular day. When we think about fatherhood in our culture, it has shifted dramatically. When Father's Day was first suggested in 1909, it was the result of a young woman of 27 having been to a Mother's Day observance and sitting beside her father, who had raised her and her siblings by himself after his wife's death. And she thought, my dad deserves a day when he is honored, and so do other fathers because of their work and their effort. What is strange is that in our culture, we have tended to devalue the importance of fathers, the importance that they make in the lives of their children. What really troubles me is that instead of encouraging fatherhood, we very often discourage it. In fact, we believe that fathers or treat fathers as if they're an appendage to the family and an appendage to the life of their children. That is extremely destructive. In fact, sociological studies have indicated just the opposite. We know that most violent young criminals come from fatherless homes. If you were to go to a prison today and were to sit down and talk with most of the young men that are incarcerated, you will discover that one of the characteristics that is common among all of them is the lack of a male role model in their lives, a father figure. That is across the board. In fact, it is one of the things that is the best indicator and determinative of a person's likelihood to become involved in criminal activity. That fascinates me in one sense because our government, to a great extent, discourages the idea of intact family units, particularly fathers being in the homes, by the way in which we have structured many of our programs. That is destructive to the lives of these young people. By not having a positive father image in their lives, many of these kids will have terrible consequences. Most young women that grow up in homes where there is a lack of a father will become promiscuous at a very early age. They will suffer with depression and will suffer with unplanned pregnancy in their lives. Those things are known sociologically. What also is an interesting factor is how that impacts young people in their spiritual development. And that was a study that was done in 1999 by a prominent psychologist. He looked at the impact on people of not having a father figure in their lives and how that impacted their spiritual development as well. So we look at these things and we go, why do we discourage or treat fatherhood as something negative in our culture? When in fact, the truth of the matter is, it is very, very important for young people to grow up in a home with a intact father figure. Now, that doesn't mean that because a child grows up in a single parent home that they will not have a good father figure, because other people can take on that role in their lives. A coach, a teacher, a pastor, a family friend, or a grandparent can take on that role of being a father figure for that child. In fact, those homes where a single mother is raising children, very often what she does is intentionally finds a person in her life that can fill that role for her kids. And when she does, their lives are better as a result of it. A father does things that a mother can't do for the kids. That father figure provides them direction and guidance, also provides a sense of security, and also, well, just bluntly says to the kids, that's wrong. You can't do that. That's not something that you should be doing in your life. Kids need that. They need boundaries. They need fences in their lives that says this is something you don't cross over. And because we have tended to negate the importance of that, we are reaping the whirlwind in our culture. And it's a saddening thing for me as a pastor and as a father. I was talking with somebody just recently about the tragedy of a young man that was likely going to prison because of that. And I thought on this Father's Day how tragic that was. But he had gotten in trouble with the police and continued to get in trouble and continued to create problems for himself and for those around him. I cannot emphasize how important that is. In Genesis chapter 18, God says something very interesting about Abraham. He says, "Can I hide this thing that I am about to do from Abraham? Because he is a man whom I have directed so that he will lead his household toward what I desire and what I need from him." As Christians, we understand the need to be faithful in our relationships and faithful in relationship to our children, to be good parents. And I challenge you as fathers to be good fathers. Father Abraham struggles in chapter 17 of Genesis. He has already become a father of Ishmael, but God is calling him to be a father in his community, to be a father of nations instead of just an exalted father. His name, beginning at the beginning of chapter 17, is Abram, which means exalted father. By the end of the chapter, God has changed his name to Abraham, which means father of nations. We don't often think about how important that is for us as Christians to become involved in our community, to become fathers, as it were, of nations, or fathers in the community, to become an influence for good and a positive influence in the culture around us. We need that so desperately in our world. When I think about that particular song, Father Abraham, I think about how important it is that we become a blessing in our community. In Galatians chapter 4, the Apostle Paul talks about the fact that we are God's children. We are children of Abraham by faith. He concluded chapter 3 of Galatians with that understanding, that we are children of the faith of Abraham. A belief in God, a belief in his purpose and will. But he goes on to say that that faith is birthed in us, as it were, an adoption into the family of God. And we have become God's children. We are accepted by God, and he is our Father. In fact, in verse 6, Paul calls upon us to identify God as our dad, as it were, a close personal relationship with God that has been established as a result of our relationship with him through Jesus Christ. So our faith, that faith of Abraham that has come into our hearts and into our lives, helps us as we follow Christ and as we do the will of God in this world. I hope that you are following God on this Father's Day. By the way, men, happy Father's Day. Now go out there and act like a father. Do the things that a father should do. Be a blessing in your community and bless the world as a result of what God has done in your life. Take care. See you next Sunday.